Hey there, friends, and welcome to this episode of the podcast. And hey, thanks for joining me. Uh, in this episode, I want you to meet my new friend Nicole, who is the owner of Betty's Pages. Betty's Pages is an indie bookstore over on the west side of Michigan, so not too far from me. And she opened her bookstore in 2020. Yes, just like so many of us, right? 2020 was going to be the year. But she has a unique story. So people, I know some of you are going to be like, why is Nicole on the podcast? No, she's not a pastor, um, in the sense that you and I think of, right? But I don't know. I think she's doing a pretty good job of doing ministry in her own right, even if she's not ordained or doesn't even necessarily identify as Christian. But she really had a vision to put together a bookstore that would be curated for mostly marginalized people groups. Bookstores you can't have everything, right? Even Barnes and Noble doesn't have everything. I know maybe Amazon, but indie bookstores, you got to curate to your audience, really, your clientele. And she wanted to she wanted to curate something that was going to really offer something unique to marginalized people groups. And that's particularly interesting because where she is at, her bookstore, is in an extremely conservative part of the state. Even though Michigan has typically been a blue state, that little sliver is very, very ultra conservative. And so there was a very unique need to offer books that would just be, I don't know, a light in a place where, there are so many marginalized people who just don't see themselves when they walk into a bookstore. And so we have a great conversation. She tells her story, not just of starting the bookstore, opening the bookstore, but also coming out and understanding what it means for her to be queer and how did she do that in an extremely conservative area of the country and the state. But then we also get into a discussion about book bans, which is kind of how she kind of came on my radar. She was on TikTok in 2021 and 2022, really talking about book bans. And she has written a book. It's kind of like a workbook, actually, on reading through books that have been banned and then also fighting book bans. So I think you'll find our conversation interesting and provocative. And then also, I just want to encourage you to get a copy of her book. It's coming out, I think, July. I don't know, she gives the date in the episode, but it's coming out in July. You can go to her website and pre-order it. It will be everywhere, available everywhere. But I definitely want you to check out her bookstore. The website will be in the show notes and her TikTok channel, so you can follow her there. And hey, if you live in the Michigan area, take a trip over there and check out her indie bookstore and support it. It's good for us to support all the bookstores and all the libraries and not to sound like a PBS show, but knowledge is power. Yes, it is. They were right all along. So anyway, I think you're going to enjoy this, and I'm excited for you to meet my friend. Hey, friends. I want to talk to you about Cole's Media Company, who is sponsoring this episode. Cody has done a great job with my website, and you can always go to the show notes and check that out. And then in the show notes is also a link to Cody's website called Cole's Media Company. And they do a lot of things other than website. So marketing, content, branding, some other things as well. Check it out. Here you can see part of his web page behind me. Anyway, I have really appreciated working with Cody, and he's done a great job helping me to just figure out where the podcast is going next. And so I know that he will be more than happy to help you figure out where you're going to land with content as well. So check it out and enjoy the episode. I've been trying to tell better stories about women and clergy and the church, but now I'm telling my story and your story because they matter. Cool. There we go. Welcome to the podcast, and famous podcaster. I mean, not podcaster, YouTuber. Wait, no, not YouTube, TikTok. I'm getting all my social media mixed up. Whatever, all the things. Mm-hmm. Now you are on podcast and YouTube.
Hey, I'll take it.
Now you're mostly on TikTok, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's primarily where you do your bookstore stuff.
Yep.
So I found you on TikTok. You know, it might have been 2021 actually, because I'm like, I haven't been on TikTok that long. I have to look and see when I got on there, but
I feel like it was like early 2021 was when I got on there, so that would make sense.
Okay, so probably about there. And you're an indie bookstore owner, so how exciting! Now, is that your background, bookstores, or?
Oh, nope. I have a very weird background. I have ADHD and I was late diagnosed, so it made my whole life make sense after the fact. Right. But I went to college, graduated in the middle of the Great Recession, couldn't find a job, went to grad school, worked in nonprofits for a while, got burnt out, worked in banking for 8 years. And that's what I was doing before I opened the store. And I had gotten a promotion and I had this great title and this better pay and this job that like on paper seemed great. I was miserable. I was literally dreading going to work every single day. And I was like, I can't do this forever. This is not going to work for me. And so being a giant nerd, I started doodling this idea that I had one day of opening a store and what that would look like, and kind of wrote out a business plan. And I showed it to some of my friends and I showed it to my husband, and like, they were supposed to tell me like, that's nice. How about you just go find another job in banking somewhere else where you'll be happier? But instead they were like, no, you need to do that. And so that was in 2019. And so I spent probably about 8 months while I was at that job, like planning to leave and planning to open the store, and doing all kinds of research. And I got a retail consultant who scared the crap out of me, which was like the best thing ever, because it really made me like think through like, oh my God, like, can I really do this? Is this something I really want to put up with? And like, owning your own business is not for the faint of heart. And so I quit my job the day after Christmas, 2019. And technically we opened on January 2nd of 2020. But 9 days later, our location flooded. We were in a temporary location, and I went in and it was raining in the building, which is not great with books. There was about like 3 inches of standing water on the floor. And I just like laid on the ground and went, what did I do? I just left my job. I put all my money into this business. So we ended up moving down the street about a block to our location and reopened mid-February 2020. Really great timing.
Now, did you have to? Well, I mean, everybody shut down for a while, but were you able to make it work?
In a way, it was actually kind of nice timing for me because I was owner operator. I was the only employee. There was nobody else, so I didn't have to like worry about employing anybody else or being able to bring them back or like what that was going to look like. It was literally just me. And at the time, my landlord was really understanding. It was like, I want you to succeed and come back. So like, if we have to, skip a month's rent and put it on the end of the lease or like something else, like we'll make it work. And so because I had no like set plans of like, this is how we do it, I just threw everything at the wall. I was like, let's try everything. Let's see what happens, what works. And so in Michigan, we shut down March 13th. And it was a total lockdown, and retail reopened. You could do like it opened back up in steps. But we were always a little bit slower with reopening things than everybody else around us. So for the first couple of months, like I just basically turned the store into a shipping warehouse and I
Mm.
would just ship things to people. Um, and then we went to by appointment and then masked, and we kept masked, like fully masked until last year. And now we do just like 1 day a week where we have masked hours for people who need it. Um, but yeah, it was fun. And yeah, nobody knew who I was because I had only been open for a month. Like all of my big marketing push was planned for in March and like didn't get to do any of that. Um, yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. Uh, I mean, you're doing well. Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert for people who don't know Nicole
Four
and
years
Betty's
later,
pages.
still here.
We're still there.
Yes.
Uh, so is that when you started? Is that when you kind of like, okay, we got to get on social
Yeah.
media and
Whew. So I had no intention of having like online shopping or anything like that. Like I wanted to be the traditional neighborhood bookstore where it was just a physical location. Like our website was just going to be like, here's our calendar and here's like what's coming up. But then COVID hit and I had to like pivot and start having online sales be available. Because like I had not anticipating having my inventory online. Like none of my inventory could go on our website without me like individually putting each single thing, which was a nightmare. So I started doing I call them boredom kits, and basically people would fill out a little form with theirs or their kids or whoever's like interests and what kind of books they liked, and I would just like hand curate a selection of books for them and deliver it to them if they were local or ship it if they were out of town. And that has actually since evolved, and we still do them, but we call them mystery boxes now. And it's just a really cool way to be able to like get that indie experience of having like a well curated like book box without having to like actually come to a store if you're not local. So we don't do a whole lot of them for locals anymore. They all just come into the store. But yeah, that was what got me through COVID, was being able to do that for people. And then word of mouth would get out and people would share on Facebook like, oh my gosh, look at this great thing that got dropped off today. And their friends would order. Yeah, it was very, very interesting time. And it was terrifying. Like every day I was like, oh my God, like panic attacks. Am I going to pay the bills? Am I going to, be open in 2 months? But looking back now, it was an amazing opportunity for me because I had to like think quick and try new things and be not afraid to like break things and do things differently. And because of that, I was never afraid to just say what was on my mind. I was never afraid to like speak out as, the summer of 2020 happened and talking about, being in a very rural community in West Michigan, which is incredibly conservative, and being a queer owned bookstore and being somebody who's, liberal and leftist and having like these ideas of equality and, all of this stuff that just kind of flies in the face of what kind of is around us. I was like, fuck it. I made it through COVID. I can survive anything. I'm not going to go back. If I wanted to keep my mouth shut, I would go back to banking and make more money than I do here.
right?
So
Yeah, I don't. For my listeners who, well, first of all, I'll obviously in the show notes I'll have Betty's pages and all the contacts and stuff. But you're in Lowell, Michigan, which is on the west side of the state. And for people who are not from Michigan and don't know, that is definitely not the blue side of the state.
here, yeah,
Even though Michigan is a technically has historically been a blue state, that little sliver is not. And so you have a very different vision. You really wanted it to be an inclusive. So will you talk a little bit about your story? Because I've seen you do little clips in your TikToks about how where were the books that I needed to help me figure out who I was. So will you talk a little bit about that and then how you wove that into your bookstore?
absolutely. One of the like key components of an indie bookstore is the curation of the books. No, there are so many books out in the world, and no bookstore can have them all. Not even a 20,000 square foot Barnes Noble. Like there's just so many books. So when you're dealing with, at the time I was 600 square feet. Now we're up to 1,800 square feet. You can only fit so many books in there. And so I wanted to make sure that every book that I brought into the store was something that fit with my vision of the world and my goals. And a huge part of that was when I was a kid, I was growing up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which is very conservative, very rural, very, very just like closeted. I was like, I didn't know a whole lot because it was the 90s and the internet wasn't really a thing quite up there yet. But I knew that I was not like everyone else, and I was just going to keep my mouth shut and just get through and get out as soon as I could. And so when I was stocking the store, I was like, finding all of these amazing books that I didn't even know existed, especially for kids, because I don't have kids myself. So I was really out of the loop on like what was out there in kids publishing before I opened the store. And suddenly there were books that were talking about queerness for kids. And there were books that were talking about equality and like history, things that I never learned in school are now available like in kids' books for kids to get to learn. And I was just fascinated by it. And so every time we stock something here in the store, like we make a very conscious effort to make sure that what we're stocking is diverse. We want to make sure everybody has a chance to see themselves on the shelves. But also like it's very important for us because we're in such a homogenous community and such a very like conservative, rural, white bread types area that we want people to get exposure to the rest of the world because I know that a lot of our kids who come in here, they're not going to stay here. They're going to go out into the world and they're going to experience other people and other places and other things. And books are a great way to kind of open doors to that before you leave. So yeah, so that's kind of our vision for the store and how we make our choices for like what we have here. And it does get a lot of pushback sometimes. I think at this point, my town has pretty used to me. Like they're just like, oh, there's that crazy bookstore lady, like whatever. But when I first started, especially in the summer of 2020, and I had, we had a sidewalk, chalkboard sidewalk sign out front, and I put, Black Lives Matter. There was some local drama going on with some other stuff, and there was this big like bunch of people were marching through downtown with their guns and their Confederate flags, and I was like, "What is happening right now?" Um, so I just put my little sidewalk sign out there because I was like, "No, I'm not gonna let you guys think that you speak for our entire town because you don't. Like, if even if it's just me, you don't speak for our entire town." And so I had that out there, and I had that sign out there every single day until we moved locations. And it got knocked over, spit on, vandalized many, many times. And it was always very interesting because every time they would do it, I would be at that point where I was like, maybe I don't need to do this anymore. Like maybe like they've gotten the idea. And then suddenly like somebody would like mess with it. And I was like, well, guess it's staying up. So it just ended up being up the whole time. And we're now in a location where we don't have a sidewalk and we can't have anything out front, which makes me very sad. So we just have it like in our window, which is not nearly as much fun.
No, no, yeah, you had to move. Was you just needed a bigger space or?
Yes. Yeah. So our downtown is beautiful and historic, but you're very limited on space. And it's also very inaccessible. So our space that we were in, you had to go up a step, you had to go up a second step, turn, and it was just very hard for anybody who's had strollers, wheelchairs, just anybody who needed any kind of like mobility aids couldn't really access our space. And for us, like, if you don't include disability, you're not really being as diverse as you think you are. And so we were
Right.
like, how can we espouse these values? And a segment of the population can't even access our store. And so we started kind of looking around in our town, which again is very small. So there's not like a lot of options for places to move to. And we found our space that we're in now, and we moved here over the summer, and it was a whirlwind. Whew, I learned how to do all kinds of stuff because we did all of the work ourselves moving in, and it was absolutely wild.
Wow, that's awesome. And your store is called Betty's Pages, and it's named after your cats, right?
It is not. The cats are
No.
named after the
Oh, how
store.
fun. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
So
how did you
Betty
get your name?
Page was a pinup artist in the 50s and 60s. And it was just a very aesthetic that I've always really loved. And I've always been a fan of hers. And I love a good pun. So when I was thinking of like what to name the store, I'm terrible at naming things. Like I was literally just gonna be like, the bookstore. I don't know. And a friend of mine was like, no, you need to do something fun and came up with Betty's Pages. And I was like, that's perfect. And so everybody always calls me Betty. My name is Nicole. And I'm fine with it. I answer to anything at this point. But when we got the store cats, I was like, I'm gonna name the cats after the store. So then when people ask, are you Betty? I can be like, no, that's Betty laying over there.
Yeah, I saw your cats, and I'm like, oh wait,
Yes.
did she name the so? But that's cool that you named the cats after the story. That's fun
Mhm.
too. Um, Now, obviously, you showed up on my For You page on TikTok um, for several reasons. One, talking about Black Lives Matter, and then some of the LGBTQ stuff. Um, but then it was a lot of it that you kept showing up was your conversation around book bans and you know oh, here's a book that's been banned, and here's a book that's been banned. You can get it here, all that kind of stuff. Um, so, will you talk a little bit about, um, I don't know, just maybe some of the personal investment that you have, your passion around the idea of book bans. Sorry, I have an eyelash stuck in my eye. Around book bans, and then we'll get into how that. Then we'll talk about how did that come up, whatever
Yeah.
segue to you writing a
Yeah.
book. Yeah.
Did. So I've always been passionate that I don't like being told what to do. And if you tell me not to do something, then I'm pretty much going to do that thing. So for me, I've always just been fascinated by book bans and the idea that people could be so upset about something in a book. And I have always read very broadly and very been interested in like trying to find like what is so terrible about these books, and I could never find it. And so as I became an adult and I started opening the store and I got more, you know, involved in the publishing world and seeing what was happening. And during 2020, during the lockdown, when there were a lot of kids who were, doing school remotely and doing homeschooling, um, there became this push to kind of, I don't know how to like to say it, but basically like, there was a lot of parents who were suddenly like, I want to be mad about something, and this is the thing that I'm going to be mad about. And so they started pushing back against the books that kids were reading. And for me, I was just fascinated because a lot of the objections that they had to books were exactly the reasons why I feel people should be reading them. They featured LGBTQIA plus characters. They featured, they were written by Black authors. They were talking about their own experiences, a lot of memoirs. And I was just blown away like that people could be so mad about it. And it really became this cultural kind of point, especially people who are more conservative use to push back against public education, push back against public libraries, and all of these institutions that I'm very passionate about. And I was like, well, nope, not okay with this. And I found that there was a lot of people like me who maybe don't have kids or don't have kids in the school, or whose kids are older and they're not seeing this firsthand, who didn't realize that it was happening. And I was like, I'm going to blow your minds. And I would just pick a list of books that were banned for a particular reason or in a particular school district. And the comments would always just be fascinating. People like, how can that be banned? I had to read that in, ninth grade, or like, we just did that book. I just saw it. And getting a chance to talk to people about the nature of book bans and how they happen so very locally that even in the same town, one school district and one school district over, you could have a book banned here that's not banned here. And showing people how this process works and how they can get involved and they can speak up and, defend the right to be able to read what people want and protect our schools and protect our libraries. And it just is such a, I get so passionate about it. Like I could just talk about it forever. And so I went viral. That was like one of my second viral TikToks was actually one of my banned books roundups. And it just kind of spun into this thing. And eventually a publisher reached out to me and they said, hey, would you be interested in writing a banned book journal? And I was like, why, yes, I would. And so last year, while we were moving the store and I was having surgery and we were doing all kinds of stuff, I wrote a book. And I'm very excited about it. It's basically everything that I talk about on social media and in the store distilled into one thing with a lot of tools. Like I really wanted to lay out for people how easy it is to go to school board meetings and to speak during the public comment time, or be able to track like there are a lot of bills that are in progress in state houses right now and at the county and local level that people need to be aware of, so like they can track like where is that at, here's how you contact your representatives, here's how you get involved, and breaking it down into really manageable steps that people can have like, okay, I can't do everything, but like I can write an email to my state representative, I can do that. Or like I can't do XYZ, but I can go and speak at the school board meeting for 3 minutes, all of these things. Because it feels very overwhelming. Like if you're out there in this space and you're, seeing these videos of off the wall school board meetings where people are screaming and there's fights and like all kinds of stuff, you're like, I don't even know where to start. What do I do? And so that was my goal with the book, was to like, here you go. And also, track all of the great reads that you're reading and think about them critically, because if it's written, if there's a book, there's somebody out there who's going to be mad about it. It doesn't matter what the book is. Somebody somewhere will be mad about it. And I wanted to encourage people to think about that as they're reading. Like, if somebody were to want to ban this, why would they want to? What would I argue with them about to say, like, here's the merits of this book? And so yeah, it was a really fun project for me to get to work on, um, especially after having kind of gone through the last couple of years. And yeah, it comes out in July 20th, which is
Yay.
just, it's crazy how fast it's coming.
Oh, that's so cool. Who's the publisher?
Now that you've just said that, my brain completely went blank.
That's okay. We'll blame it on ADHD.
I know that they're distributed by Macmillan. It's not Macmillan, but
Okay.
media something. Yeah. It's like one of those things when people ask me what's your favorite book, and suddenly I'm like, I know I've read books
Right? Right? It's
every
okay.
time.
I'm also late diagnosed with ADHD, so I'm right there with you on
Yep.
it. If you ask me what am I reading right now, I'm like, I have no idea.
Something.
But I read 20 pages of it today.
Yep.
Uh, that's exciting, and obviously you'll be rolling it out right there at the store, and it'll be available like lots of places too. So
Yes, it'll be available at all retailers, indie bookstores, online, everywhere. We're doing a pre-order through the store. Our goal is to sell 451 before
cool.
it comes out, and that's our goal. And then we have like stretch goals of like 1984 and other fun plays on banned books and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, it's really exciting. I had never had that as a goal for myself. Like, no. So when they reached out, and I was just like, why not? Let's try something new. That's always just kind of been my style. Is like, yeah, okay, I don't need free time. What's that?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's boring.
Oh man, that's so cool.
Mhm.
Um, any other than your book, other than your book coming out, any new ideas? Like, because your store has grown quite a bit in 4 years. I mean, now you have staff, right?
I have three staff, two cats, a whole lot more square foot than we had before. And it's just wild to me. The thinking back, we're coming up on our 4-year anniversary of being open. And I think back to when I first opened, and it was just me 600 square feet, just sitting. Like, I have this picture of me sitting in our chair, just like with my head in my hands. My husband took it. And it was just one of those late nights where I was packing orders and had spent all day alone in the bookstore because nobody could be in there. And that person and this person now, it's just like, it's a whole different world. It's a whole different store and experience. And it really means a lot to me. And we do a reading challenge each year. We're on our 3rd year doing it now. That encourages people again to like read diversely. And the fun thing with our challenge is that we have it for the whole family. So we make recommendations for kids, middle grade readers, YA, and adult. And this year we're really focusing on fiction. The last 2 years we had done fiction and nonfiction options, but this year we're really leaning into fiction, because we just, as a store, like all of us, we really love the power of fiction for people. Uh, and it's just been really neat. Like, I get a lot of messages from people who, you know, have pushed themselves to read new things and have learned new things, or have shared, stuff with their kids, and or bring their kids here to the store. And like, every time I'm having a hard day, I swear, like, the world knows, and I will get a message from some, mom who tells me about their teenager that they brought to the store, and they felt safe here. And this was like the first time in West Michigan that they really felt seen and like cared about. And I'm just like, it's fine. I'm fine. I'm not crying. It's okay. And so I just want to keep doing that. Like, if I could just keep doing that for the rest of my life, like, I'd be good.
Oh, that's so cool. Any other than you got any other like fun projects coming up? Or I mean, like that's a
Yeah,
lot. I mean, this is a
it's a
lot of
lot.
what you.
It's honestly, I'm at the point now where I just go where my staff tells me. Like, we do a ton of events, and I love doing them. I hate planning them. I'm not a details person. So I just like have these off the wall ideas, and I shoot them to my staff, and then they're like, okay, cool. Here's when you're gonna go do this, or here's where you're gonna do that at. And I just love having them here because they get the vision and they get what it is that I created, and they really have taken that on themselves. So that way I feel comfortable, like I can leave, and I know that when somebody comes in here, they're going to get the same experience, that they would have if I had been here.
Yeah.
And so that gives me opportunities. I flew to DC. Yes, flew back yesterday. I flew out on Tuesday. I was out there for 36 hours because there was an opportunity to do some advocacy work for small businesses. And I was like, sure, why not? And I just was like, let's go. And I'm going to Arizona in June to do something with the Arizona State University. I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing, but I'm going. Sure, why not? And I love being able to jump on those opportunities and see like let's find out where this takes us and see what happens.
Yeah, that's cool.
Mhm.
Now, since you're okay, so can we talk about uh, LGBTQ stuff for a
Yeah,
few minutes?
absolutely.
Okay. Are you she, her? What's your pronouns?
Yes, she, her.
Okay, I should have asked you like before we started, but like as advertised, I'm like I was pretty sure that what it was. That's what they were. Um, so June is coming, and you're on the west side of the state, which we've already established is extremely conservative. So how do you handle Pride Month
Mhm.
um, in the area that you're at? Like, what are your
We have
strategies?
we have a particular love for Pride here. And when I opened during 2020 and early 2021, there was a lot of, online bullying type behavior by grown adults, which just blew my mind. But one of them was they were so just like offended that I existed. And they were like, she's going to bring in drag queens to do story time and it's just going to be all this stuff. And I was like, that's a really great idea. I should do that. And so I grew up even further west, like on the actual lakeshore in a city called Holland, which is even more conservative and just in a different style. And they've had a Pride festival now for 20 years. And I was like, you know what? If Holland can have a Pride, Lowell can have a Pride. So got together some friends of mine and was like, hey, let's plan a Pride festival. I don't care if it's 12 kids show up and that's it. Like, we're going to do this thing and we're going to show them that you get to be who you are and you get to be proud of that and you get to be accepted, even here in Lowell, because you shouldn't have to go to Chicago or Detroit or Grand Rapids to feel like you belong. Like, you should be able to do that in your hometown. So we
Yeah,
planned it. And because it was whew, 2021, yep, that was our first one. Nobody else was planning prides that year because we were still technically in lockdown. And so as we were planning, we were like, okay, if we can't do it in person, what would we do instead? And we just kind of planned hoping for the best, but had backup contingencies for the worst. The lockdown ended up being lifted like a month before our event. And we were like, cool. We were the only pride happening in Michigan in person that year. There might have been like one more, but like we were one of the only. We had over 4,000 people show up to our pride, which was our very first one. Our town only has 4,000 people. So it was just blew the expectations out of the water. And we had this amazing event and we had this small town feel to it because we're a small town. That was our goal. We wanted this to feel like us. Um, and yeah, I have kids who've gone 3 years in a row now, and I get to see them each time. And it's just like this amazing experience to watch them grow and evolve and feel more confident and more comfortable in who they are. And I'm just like, I love this. So this is my first year where I'm not on the planning board. I stepped down after last year because I wanted to give other people like a chance to lead and do the things and not make it, where people kind of rely on me to always be the one to do it. So it's really hard for me because I'm like, it's fine, I can do this. But I'm super excited because I get to be a volunteer this year. Like I get to just show up and be like, how can I help? What do I get to do? I'll do whatever. So that's really, really exciting. At the store, we go all out, of course, because that's what we do. We are 3/4 queer. We have our one, we call her our token, like neurotypical straight girl, and she's amazing. We love her. But like, this is our identity and this is who we are. And so for us, it's just like we do this all year, but in June we get to be extra, extra, and it's super fun for us.
that's fun.
Mhm.
That's a lot of fun. I'm glad you kind of like found your space and all that stuff. And like, man, you grew up in the UP. Whoo. Uh,
Yeah.
that's that's
In the 90s, no less. It was a
yeah, in
wild
the
time.
'90s,
Yeah,
right? And like
it was
people who
rough.
are not from Michigan are like, we don't understand. I'm like,
The
"Mm,
further north you go, it's very similar to the further south you go. Like that's how
right.
I always describe it to people.
It
And
is.
growing up in
Isn't
the
that
UP
funny?
is, yeah,
And you'll
yeah,
even they
mhm,
even have a different accent.
yeah,
It's like they almost have a
yeah.
southern accent
It's
sometimes.
very
They
similar. It's much
yeah,
slower and it has, yeah, it's when I go home, I pick it back up again. I've always talked way too fast. So like I never had it quite as much as that kind of very stereotypical. It's very similar to like the Minnesota accent that people will use. But yeah, it's very interesting for me to go home. Um, I grew up in even smaller town than I live in currently. And my sister is a couple of years older than me, and I love my sister dearly, but I was always, oh, you're Rachel's little sister. Oh, like your sister's so great. And I was always like, I'm my own person, as younger sisters do. And now, my sister is one of my biggest supporters, and just she loves because she gets to be Nicole's sister now instead of me being Rachel's sister. But we have people that we knew when we were kids growing up in the UP who have now like reached out to me and been like, I was going through the same thing. Like I was hiding who I was too, or I didn't understand, what I know now. And like, it's so great to get to see you. Like I've had people who like, I haven't talked to since we were like in middle school who I popped up on their, FYP on TikTok and they were like, I know that girl. And, messaged me and we're like, oh my gosh. And yeah, it's really neat. I love that I get to do this and that I get to be very loud and out there and, who I am because it makes it easier for those people who are not trying to be quite as extravagant as me to just like exist and not be like the weird ones. And that's what I'll be the weird one. I'll be the loud one. I'll be extra. That's fine. So yeah, it's like the coolest thing.
That's cool. I'm curious, how did you process that? You
Oof.
know?
It was I knew what straight was and I knew I wasn't that. And I knew what gay was and I knew I wasn't that. And I was just like, uh, I guess I'm a freak. I don't know. There's no other options. Like at the time, nobody talked about bisexual or pansexual wasn't even like anywhere on the map. And so I was just like, I guess I'm a weirdo because I'm attracted to everybody and I don't know what to do with this. And I moved down here when I was in high school, and the internet was a thing by that point, and I finally figured out like bisexual was who I was, but I was so far in the closet at that point and so scared of like, nope, I am not saying anything. Like maybe someday when I'm an adult and I live somewhere else, I will, but I'm not. No, I'm not doing that right now. And then I joined the military and I couldn't say anything because don't ask, don't tell was still, the policy at the time. And so I was like, well, guess I'm just gonna stay here in the closet. It's fine. And I had gotten married at that point, and I was like, now it doesn't matter. I'm married to a man. Like doesn't matter. That's it. I'm done. I guess I'm straight. Went through that whole process of kind of unpacking my own like internalized biphobia and figuring that out. And came out when I was 25. I was out of the military at that point. I was also divorced at that point. And when I came out to my mom, she had the best response. She was like, yeah, we know. I was like, oh, okay. And it was just one of the best like coming out experiences. But, growing up, not having that language and not knowing that I was not alone makes me that much more like now giving kids the ability to learn these things about themselves, like have language, because whether it applies to them or not, they're going to go out in the world and they're going to meet people who are trans, who are non-binary, who are, some flavor of queer, and they're going to have the language to be able to understand that and to be respectful and to not like, you know, flounder out there. And that's something that's really cool to get to do.
Right, to have the ability to be empathetic
Yes.
and show
Knowledge is
compassion. And
power. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it is. It is. I think about there's a story of Ben Carson, who's also from Michigan, also would be very conservative, but I do like his story, the story he tells about his mother making him and his brother. They had to go to the library every week, pick out a book, and do a book report. And I feel like, um, if we didn't have public libraries and we didn't have indie bookstores, um, man, we'd be so um, limited in our ability to just relate to other human beings, um, because you know well, we all have, even especially if you're in a small town, obviously you have a limited circle, but really if you think about it, most of us have pretty limited circles, right? Like especially if you're a kid, right? You go to school, you come home, maybe
These
you're at
like
a
20 kids, maybe that's it. Yep.
yeah, and so um, you're gonna see, this is all you're gonna see, and you need to have opportunities to say, hey, there's a big world out there with lots of different kinds of people out there, and lots of different uh, you know, people modeling who you are or who you could be, right? Like I
Yeah.
think about the idea of that representation, that we miss out. Yeah, we miss out when we're not
Yeah.
we're not readers. So
I think about how much quicker I could have gotten to all of the places that I am,
right.
mentally and emotionally if I had just seen a happy, successful queer adult as a kid. Like if
Mhm.
I had known that that was an option, I would have been like, oh my gosh, I can do that. And, that's another one of the things that I get to do now is I get to show, the kids here that like, yeah, you can grow up in a small town in a, place where you're bullied and you're not welcomed and you're not understood. And you can just fly in the face of all of that and be successful and be happy and be who you are completely and authentically. And it's okay. And so like that it is something that I take very seriously and I take, really to heart. Like I get to model those things that I would have loved to have had again as a kid. And I just really run a lot of my decisions through the filter of what did 13-year-old Nicole need? Can I do that now? And then I do that thing, whatever it is.
That's cool. Okay, so I have a lot of my listeners are clergy,
Mhm.
men and women. It's like 60-40, right? So like
Yeah.
60 women, 60% women, 40%. Most of them would either be moderate conservative or progressive.
Mhm.
So um, I guess advice from you
Yeah.
for clergy who are finding themselves on this threshold of this is all new to me, and I want to be, I want to be someone who creates safe space,
Yeah.
for people who are different than me, but in particular LGBTQ plus people. So just advice for them on
We
whatever.
are incredibly lucky that for a town of this size, we have an open and affirming congregation here. They were our first sponsor for Pride. They have been our loudest advocates. They have been there every step of the way for everything, just continually saying, hey, we want to help. We want to do this. What can we do? And, we all mess up. Even I do. We all will. That's like just the human experience. And it's the biggest thing that I will tell people is that just acknowledge that. Like you're going to mess up, say sorry, and then keep moving. Like don't like wallow in or anything like that, but be willing to let people give you feedback because the amount of trust that it takes for somebody to feel safe enough to tell you, hey, you messed up is huge. So like if you've reached that point, you're doing really, really well. Like take that, don't take it like offensively or to heart, but be like, thank you. Like, I appreciate that. I want to do better. I want to keep growing. And there's so many great resources that are out there, for the Christian community who want to understand and want to be affirming and want to be welcoming. So like dive into those, read the books. There's so many great books out there. Find the local organizations, especially there's one that's called PFLAG. It's Parents, Friends of Lesbian and Gay. And it's an organization for allies in particular. And they have amazing resources and they are just a fantastic spot to start to feel comfortable of like, okay, I'm going to step my toes in here and like this is what I want to start doing. I want to learn. This is a great place to like ease into that. That's what they do is their entire mission is about helping friends and family feel comfortable and confident to be good allies and to know how to show up for, their friends or family members. So I just have a lot of love for them, but also just whatever local organizations you have, be willing to have the uncomfortable conversations and have the conversations with them of religious trauma is real, like especially for a lot of us, West Michigan is very conservative because it's very Christian reformed and like it impacts a lot of our institutions that aren't even necessarily, religious. And so for a lot of us, like I got out pretty well unscathed from it, but like some of my friends did not. And so for them, like even going into a church, whether it's for a service related thing at all, like even to go to a church for like a food bank, they can't do it. Like it just, there's too much trauma there that they can't do it. So finding ways to work with community partners to do things like that and just hearing those stories, it's amazing, like the connections and the learning that can come from that.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I'm glad you pointed out about that idea of the west side of the state is Christian Reformed, because I'm just outside of Detroit, like literally like 3 miles outside of Detroit. Um, and we're heavily Catholic over here. So we have a heavily Catholic influence, which and a lot of our blue collar, so they tend to be Democrats anyway.
Yep.
So it shifts a lot of things that way.
Yep.
Then if you're more Christian Reformed in your theology, and the people who are listening will know exactly what I'm
Yep.
talking about, but because you lived it. Um, but yeah, that idea um, of religious trauma and Man, that's a great idea because we have, well, the church I just recently left that I had planted, we had a, you know how they have the free libraries, right? So we had
Mhm.
the free food box, and so we had a
Yep.
giant box pantry that was outside where people could come, and so that way they could do it discreetly,
Yeah.
and nobody knew, and nobody was looking for Ed ID, and we didn't care how many people, you know, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that kind of idea of any way that you can um,
Yep.
make things less triggering for people. Yeah.
We, again, we have the congregation here who's been so amazing and welcoming. And we had an opportunity to do an event with Mercury Stardust, who is another big name on social media, on TikTok. And I just like decided to shoot my shot and like reached out and was like, hey, we'd love to do an event. And they agreed to do it. And she was amazing. And so we had this event and we had so many people who wanted to come, and our town is very small, there are not a lot of venues, and our store is not very big, so we could not fit very many people in it. We're still at our old space, and we had worked with a local restaurant, we were going to do it there. They ended up closing like a month before when the event was supposed to be, so we had to like scramble to try and find another location. The local theater is not welcoming and affirming and kind of terrible. All of these like locations were like, we can't do it for this reason, we can't do it for that reason, we can't, like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And ended up going and doing it at the church. And we acknowledged when we sent out the information, like, hey, like, get your tickets. And I'm saying, like, it's at a church, and it's at a church that looks like a very churchy church. Like it's the very, traditional style church building. Like, this is a church. Like, you can't get away from that. And we were like, we know that this can be a point that's going to keep people from being able to attend. And I wish that we had some way to like have some other venue. Like, I wish that there was some other opportunity, but it's either we only get to have 30 people or we can have 200 people. Like, ugh. And it was just one of those opportunities where it was like, these are the things that, we got some people in the door who were leery, who were like, and they came in and they saw, they have, pride flags on the walls, and they have gender neutral bathrooms, and they have, in their statement that like everybody is welcome here. Hold on, my Roomba just decided to go off. So loud. And so they got an opportunity to see that like it can be different. Like, you can be in spaces of faith that are not going to be inherently against you as a person. And that was a cool opportunity for me to get to introduce people to that, and also for me to really think about like, I really need some more locations. And that was actually one of the big factors in why we decided to move. That was like right at the time when we were like making the pro con list. Like, do we stay? Do we move? Do we renew our lease? Do we do something different? And I was like, I need a location where I can do events that are bigger. That, I love the church and I love being able to do stuff with them. And I'm so incredibly thankful for them. But like, I can't do everything there because like there are people who just cannot go, no matter how amazing it is, no matter how much people vouch for them. Like, they're just like, I can't do it. And I want to make sure that I don't just always go there, even though I can, and they're great and I love them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting because everything in West Michigan is tied to the church. Your social life is tied to the church. Your family life is tied to the church. Like, everything revolves around that, and trying to find those spaces and those places for people to exist in groups and community outside of the church is kind of my new obsession and passion of like trying to create those spaces, which is
Yeah.
one of the things that the bookstore does.
Yeah. It is, it's totally triggering. And um, I have a friend of mine, and she was going to come and visit when I was still preaching and leading a church. And she's like, I love you, and I know that you're here for me, but she said, I can't walk in there without having an anxiety attack. And I'm like, I don't understand, but I do understand.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you don't need to
I
explain.
empathize, but I can't sympathize, or
Right.
however
Yeah.
that's said. Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's just, there's just too much trauma wrapped up in it. And, um, so yeah, I'm glad that you were able to find a new space where you can still do some
Yes.
stuff. And
It's very nice. Like, everything is on wheels, so we can like push everything against like the walls and like have this just big open space and accessible and all the things. It's so nice.
that's good. Yeah. I mean, in Michigan, it's not like you can just be like, oh, we're just going to have it outside under the palm trees, right?
Right? Yeah, not always an option.
No.
Very rarely, in fact. Yeah. So it's always very interesting, just kind of being out there in the world and like learning and like continuing to learn. Like I will never stop learning and trying to do better and trying to learn more about my own community. Like I don't know everything, and I would not like if you ever hear me say I know everything, like I'm a pod person because I will never know everything and I don't want to. Like I want to keep growing and learning. And so yeah, that's what I always tell people is like if you think you're done, you're not done. You're missing stuff. We're never done.
Wow, that's so cool. All right, well, people can get your book. When can they pre-order?
Yeah, so this book is dangerous. It comes out July 20th, so you can reach out to your local bookstore and ask them to order it. Or you can go to our website, which is bettiespages.com, and you can get it through us, or anywhere that you get books from. But I definitely love to tell people to go get it from their local bookstore because I'm a little bit passionate about our industry, but it will be available everywhere.
Okay, and so, but if they come to yours, they can pre-order it, right?
They sure can. Yep.
Is there like a spot on there? I looked briefly, but I didn't look for the
There's a
pre-order
pre-orders
stuff.
page.
Okay,
I should really create like a landing page just for my book since it's kind of a big deal for me.
that's okay.
I just have
I'll
it's
put
on
the
the list.
pre-order
Yes.
link
Yeah.
in the show
Hmm.
notes, and then they
Perfect.
can
Yes.
peruse the rest of the website or make a trip over to Lowell.
Yes. Come see us.
Oh my gosh.
We're the Midwest. We get people all the time who've like traveled from pretty far away, and I'm always like in awe of it because we'll get people who found us on TikTok who've traveled from Detroit or Chicago or further out, and I'm always like, I hope you weren't disappointed. And they're always like, no, this is great. I was like, okay, good. Thanks. I'm glad.
Yeah, you're not that far from me. You're like 2 hours. So
It's such a Midwest thing. We're like, yeah, it's only 2 or 3 hours. No big deal. We can do
look,
that.
I
Yeah.
mean, most of us travel 45 minutes one way to work. So two
Yep.
hours to a bookstore. I mean, come on.
Worth it.
Is there coffee nearby?
There is.
Okay. Well, see,
And there's
then it's,
pizza right next door too. So,
oh,
you know,
there you go. Get your coffee, your books, your
yeah,
pizza. You're
whole
all
thing.
good.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much.
Really.
I've been trying to tell better stories about women and clergy and the church, but now I'm telling my story and your story because they matter.